This is Polyamory Weekly, tales from the front of responsible non-monogamy from a pansexual, kink-friendly point of view. A warning for our under 18 listeners. This is an adult-oriented podcast about really lascivious things, like communication and honesty in relationships. If you're under 18 and looking for upfront advice and answers to questions about sex, please visit scarletteen.com.
This is Polyamory Weekly, episode 516 for May 4th, 2017. Coming up on today's show, The Art of Three. That's coming up on today's show. Hello, everyone. I am your host, Minx, and we've got some really awesome content for you folks today. I say that every week, but I just get really excited about all the different aspects of polyamory and monogamy and relationships and love and sex and romance that we can get into. It reminds me, in the early days, I'd been podcasting about 3 to 5 years. And when I would tell other people about the podcast that I'm doing, I say, I do this podcast about polyamory. It's, being in a relationship, long-term, loving, committed relationship with more than one person with the full knowledge and consent of everyone involved. And the person would say, really? You could talk about that? Like every week? For years? And from the deplorable state of my inbox, which has, always many more messages in it than I have time to answer, I say, yeah, there's definitely always a lot to talk about. But before we get into our amazing interview with one of the authors of the polyromance novel, The Art of Three, a couple of announcements today. First of all, I will be giving an Ignite talk in Seattle on May 18th. So if you're in the Seattle area, I would invite you to come out to Town Hall and enjoy Ignite. Now, for those of you who don't know, Ignite is an event that happens all around the world. And the idea is that people speak on a topic that they are passionate about, but they are only allowed 5 minutes. So you have 5 minutes. You are allowed 20 PowerPoint slides, each of which is automatically forwarded every 15 seconds, whether you're done talking or not. Their tagline is, enlighten us, but make it quick. So it's kind of like a TED Talk, but it's a quarter of the time even of a TED Talk. What I love about going to Ignite is that you can hear the passion of 10, 15 different people, but in bite-sized segments. So if it's something you're not interested in, it's over in 5 minutes. If it's something you are interested in, there's always a way to get more information and you can find out a little more. I have been to Ignite talks that inspired me to rent a bike and get on a bike for the first time in many years. I found out what it's like to be a merchant marine from this amazing woman who talked about it and showed pictures. And I'm like, I had no idea. I've learned all about how to eat insects, how to raise kids, how to have an argument. There's so many fabulous ideas that are presented on the Ignite stage, and I'm honored to be a part of it. I'll provide a link to the posting announcing me as a speaker in the show notes, which are at polyweekly.com or on your app if you're listening through the podcast app. I'll also provide a link to buy tickets. You do need to buy tickets. They're only $5, but the event tends to sell out. So I would encourage you, if you're pretty sure you're going to go, buy some tickets. You can always resell them if it turns out you can't go. There are always last-minute people looking to buy tickets, so you will not waste the money, I promise. Now, the title of my talk, which I have not yet mentioned, is, surprise, surprise, 8 Things I Wish I'd Known About Polyamory Before I Tried It and Fracked It Up. Yes, I published the book, 3 years ago, and just now got the courage to put together an Ignite talk. Well, there you go. But I'm really excited. And by the way, if you're new to the show, because we have an incredible number of new downloads and new listeners after I appeared on the Savage Love cast and then recently gave some advice on the Savage Love column, I'm just, so tickled pink and so fangirl squee that I am part of the Dan Savage empire. I'm so honored. And I know that we have a lot of new listeners to welcome. We got more downloads in April than we ever have before. Now, okay, I know Asking a podcaster about their stats is like asking a woman her age. You just don't do it. It's rude. You just say you look pretty. You just say, I like your podcast. You don't have to ask how many downloads we get. But I've got to say, I'm going to tell you because for April, fuck! Oh my God, over 100,000 downloads. 102,000 the last time I checked, which was like 10 minutes ago. I don't think we've ever got more than 80, and that was on a really good month. Usually we hover between 40 and 60. So let's tip our hats to Dan Savage for opening up a wider audience, and welcome to all our new Savage Love listeners, because stats make podcasters happy, and we just love it, and we love you, and thank you for listening, and please don't leave me. But for those who don't know, 3 years ago, I published this book originally as an ebook, and then I also made it available in a paperback through Amazon Print on Demand, Create Space, for people who wanted a paper book. It's called 8 Things I Wish I'd Known About Polyamory Before I Tried It and Fracked It Up. It's not really long. I'm a fairly concise person. I know you can't tell from the podcast, but when writing, I come from a pedagogical background, so I tend to be very concise, write in bullet points, and get to the point fairly quickly. It's under 100 pages, retails for $8.99. It's available as an ebook or as a paperback. If you haven't read it, it really is exactly what it sounds like. It is not an end-to-end how-to on how to do polyamory. For that, I would highly recommend Tristan Taormino's Opening Up, which has a lot of research behind it. It's not about polyethics. For that, I would recommend More Than Two, which is probably the longest book about polyamory out there today, but it goes into a lot of details of the whys and wherefores of how we should treat each other in poly relationships, in the poly community, and as part of our culture at large. This is something much smaller and much more humble. This is basically a list of the lessons that I learned in my first few years of polyamory when I was making all the poly mistakes, and I thought I was doing everything right, so was not doing everything right, and some of the trials and tribulations that my partners and I went through in my first poly relationship. It's basically all the lessons I learned the hard way. That is the equivalent of my Poly 101 class that I like to teach at conferences. These are the broad strokes that if you're new to poly, these are going to be the things that will be helpful to you. I'm not going to tell you exactly, it doesn't tell you how to set up your relationship or how to deal with specific issues, but it does tell you the generalities that are very easy to get wrong. And instead of spending 2 to 5 years getting them wrong, read the book. Hopefully you can skip that part and, create your own custom-made drama. But I will provide a link to that in the show notes. I believe, if I remember the URL, I think it's just polyweekly.com/8-things-book. But I'll provide a link in the show notes if you haven't read it yet. And with that, I'm very excited to talk to one of the authors of the new poly romance novel, The Art of Three. Very excited to welcome to the Poly Weekly studios today one of the co-authors of the romance novel, The Art of Three, Racheline Maltese. Welcome.
Thank you.
Would you care to introduce yourself to our lovely podcast listeners?
Sure thing. My name is Racheline. It is actually my real name. My parents just were kind of hippies and got creative. I have been writing romance novels since 2013 with my creative partner, Erin. And after trying not to write poly because the romance community isn't always super cool with it, we just gave up and wrote the book we wanted to write.
And I'm so excited that you did, because it seems like every romance novel is, she has to choose between this hot guy and that hot guy. And why on earth would you choose?
Yeah, I've actually been promoting it at this point as 2 men, 1 woman, no love triangle.
I love it.
Because I feel like even people who aren't poly or don't know if they want to read a poly romance are really sick of that plot anyway.
Yeah, it's very silly to me that people feel they have to choose. I mean, okay, I shouldn't say silly because a lot of people are monogamous and that's okay, but it does seem rather forced. So did you write this book for poly people or is it for everybody?
I think it's really for everybody, but I think just in getting the reviews that we've gotten, because it's been out for a couple weeks now, poly people have been writing us like these gorgeous emails like, I can't believe I found a book like this. This is miraculous. I'll confess, when we started writing this book, although we wanted it to appeal to poly people because we are poly people. We also kind of are just like, oh, we have this idea for 3 characters and they're really hot and we just want to see them have a lot of sex. And then, because, hey, romance novels. And then as we started writing it, we kept getting really involved in the logistics and the emotions and the extended family of everybody sort of navigating this relationship that was forming in the plot. And while a lot of our other books have been much more erotic, what we sort of discovered was that sex was not the thing that was really explaining the characters or driving the narrative. And it became this fade to black book that I joke is like, it's the poly book you can make your mom read. But I don't want to say that it's tame because of that, but it really is focused on the logistics and the emotions and the endless conversations about schedules and all of that, like sort of annoying stuff in like a fun, perfect, romantic way.
Wait a second. So there's no sex? There's no hot sex in your poly romance novel? That ain't right.
No, there's a ton of sex, and that they're having sex, but a lot of the time it's like they start having sex and then it fades to black, as opposed to, and now let's talk about like how big their dicks are. Like I've written tons of books that talk about that. This book just isn't that book.
That is really interesting. So you felt like the comparison, the size of the dick was not as important for a poly book. Ah, so many lessons there. So you know who you wrote the book for. Do you have any surprises in your audience?
A little bit, in that, it's funny that I kept thinking that romance readers in general would be hostile to it. But by and large, they've been very welcoming to it. And they're like, I never thought to read something like this, but I loved it. And I understood how it worked. And it surprised me because Erin and I's first book has a polyamorous secondary character. And the main couple, it's more monogamish than monogamous. Like there are aberrations. They break up for a while. They see other people. They get back together. They have a threesome. It's not dramatic. It's just a thing. But they don't really identify as poly. That book caused all the drama in the world. Like every review was like, they're cheating. This is terrible. I'm like, but everybody's happy. Everybody's discussing it. Nobody's lying. And people were really uncomfortable with it. But somehow with this one, we wrote it in a way that people who didn't know they would be comfortable with poly were comfortable with it. And I have no idea what we did, and I'd like to figure it out.
Well, that's a great victory. Let me know if you figure that out.
I will. I don't think I'm ever going to figure it out, but this time it just came off really different for readers. So,
what did you learn from writing this book? It sounds like it was a bit of a departure for you.
It was, and it was also kind of, I don't want to say it was an ordeal. I mean, we love writing. We love writing together, but most of the other books we've written were very easy. And this one, I was traveling. So I was in Europe for a lot of it, and Erin lives in Washington, D.C. So we were in different time zones, and in the middle of it, we're working on stuff on it. And she's like, oh, by the way, my husband and I are going to start trying to have a baby. And I'm thinking, I'm 6 hours ahead of you. I'm trying to finish this book. We have a deadline. And now you're telling me about this major thing that's going to affect all of our lives. And we have to have a conversation about it. But it's 3 a.m. for me. Are you kidding me? So, and the book was a really good thing to open that conversation. But it just, we had to do a lot of long distance communication, both about our relationship and about our writing career together. And we had to do it in the most unideal circumstances possible. And I think when you do that, when you're doing a creative project with someone, I think that energy goes into the book. And I think in this case, it wound up really giving the book something very lovely and warm while also having very high stakes. But I have to say, in terms of, we learned so much about not being scared to communicate with each other while writing this. But man, I never want to go through that again.
Oh, interesting. So you're kind of living a little poly co-writing relationship while you're co-writing the poly book.
Yeah, and it was super weird because the book is really not reflective of the structure of our lives in a lot lot of ways. Like, I have a nesting partner. The book has a lot of age differences in it, but our age differences are actually sort of the opposite of the book. I'm in my 40s. She's in her late 20s, and it's like having a baby. I'm like, you do you, because I'm never, ever willing to have my body go through that. But I'm excited about it. I'm like, yay, baby. But so it was very funny to be dealing with all the issues in the book in a completely different way than they come up in the book. And it was very weird feeling like I was living this double life as I was writing it.
So how do you write a sexy conversation about Google Calendar? I can't imagine that.
That conversation was not super sexy. But there's a lot of the three main characters in the book live in different countries. One of them lives in England, one of them lives in Spain, and one of them lives in Ireland. So there's a lot of logistics, and the one character who's new to poly, sort of learning that he's not just getting into a relationship with a couple, he's also getting into a relationship with each of these two people individually, and how to navigate that and have those separate relationships and not have it be this structural impossibility of 2 against 1 and whatnot. So a lot of the logistics that had to get talked about was sort of through the viewpoint of this character going, what does this mean? How do I do this? How do I not get the short end of the stick? How do I not be a unicorn? So that was sort of where a lot of the logistics that show up in the book come from. And of course, now that I say, oh, the characters live in 3 different European countries, yeah, we wrote this before Brexit happened, and now it's a political fantasy too, by accident.
Very interesting. I'm not really big into romance novels, but now that you've given me that little taste of the plot, I want to read a book about how she ends up not being a unicorn or not feeling like a unicorn.
Actually, the potential unicorn is a boy.
Oh.
He's 24. Yeah, that was the other thing. I have been the person being chased as a unicorn so many times. There was no universe in which I could have written that and not written it like really angry. So we went into it. So the characters are a 48-year-old painter, her husband, and then this 24-year-old that he meets at work and starts and like has a fling with, and then introduces her to, and she's like, oh, he's fabulous. I'm going to take him back to Spain for a month and date your fling. And then eventually the 3 of them get together.
That sounds absolutely wonderful. And what a lovely fantasy.
Exactly. And it was strange to balance the unicorn stuff is kind of toxic to, yeah, but what if it worked?
Yeah, I'm and it sounds like you didn't write this book with any intention of being didactic or instructional with respect to polyamory.
No. I mean, I think it definitely doesn't come off that way in tone. There is like some poly 101 in it because we knew it had to be there for a traditional romance reader. And we also knew that by writing one character who'd never done poly before, there's this ongoing joke where every time there's a crisis and they have to have a conversation, he kind of says all the right things. He's like, what is up with that? Why is he so good at this? Like, we're, in our 40s and we're terrible at this. And eventually he confesses that he, went on Amazon and ordered a ton of books and is just doing what they say and hoping for the best.
That is fabulous. I love it. What's your favorite thing about the book?
My favorite thing about the book is that it has a 48-year-old heroine. One of the other things in writing it, I'm 44 now, and to get to have an older woman be sexy and be in control and to just set her boundaries very clearly, even though she's married, she and her husband don't live together most of the year. When he's being ridiculous and getting in the way of her career, she's like, that's fine, but you need to go do this somewhere else because these are the things I need to do. And late in the book, she winds up pregnant, much to everyone's surprise. And she's not opposed to the idea, but she's like, I am not interested in being the primary parent. I have 3 adult children. I have done my time. And if we're going to do this, you boys are going to be in charge of this baby because I've done my time. And getting to write a woman who was very traditionally feminine in lots and lots of ways, but still very, very strict about her boundaries was super exciting for me. Like, I wish I could be her when I grow up.
Have you got any flack from readers for that particular character decision?
No, none. She's probably the thing everybody likes the most about the book too, which has shocked me. I was really scared about it. There were so many. I normally am not that person. Erin is frequently the person who's like, what will people think? How is this going to go? Everything's going to be weird. And I worry, but I'm usually very confident under that worry. But this was the book where I was the crazy person.
Why was it that you were the crazy person? Was it because the main character is much like you?
I wish she were like me, but it was personal. And there's also a series of subplots in the book where each character has a part of their history or family culture that they're isolated from in a certain way. Nerea, the woman, her family is converso Jewish, so they were Jewish originally and became Catholics in Spain during the Inquisition at some point. And then Callum, her husband, talks about, having lots of flings in the 80s and 90s and the effect of AIDS on the queer community. And then Jamie, the Irish boy that they're involved with, his father was adopted out of the Magdalene Laundries. So he has this sense of, I don't know my family history because I don't know who my grandmother was, this whole heartbreaking thing that exists there. And while none of these things are significant plots, they maybe get 5 pages in the whole book. They're very raw personal things. And Erin's Irish American. So Jamie's plot was the one that was super resonant for her in terms of her extended family. And I'm Jewish and have a converso Jewish background also. And I grew up in New York in the 80s going to ACT UP protests when I was 14. So that sense of generational loss is really personal to me. So in the middle of this book, it's just like, oh, let's be sweet and everybody will be in love and have a really big bed and great sex and a perfect life, is this very emotional thing that I was like, is anyone going to be able to relate to this? Or am I just exposing myself in a way that I don't want to? But it seems to have worked, and I still don't understand why. But most of my books, I don't feel like are about me or who I am or things about my life. And this one was. And every time we thought we'd put everything of ourselves into it we could, we found one more.
How is the book being received?
The reviews have been great. I've been super thrilled. It's been like 5-star review after 5-star review. I've gotten thank you letters from romance writers who have said to me that they're poly and they didn't know if they would be able to write romances that would reflect their experience of relationships successfully. So that was really gratifying. 1 or 2 bad reviews that were, I don't read MMF, male, female books, not for there to be really hot sex. And I was like, well, that's fine. Like if you wanted higher heat, there's tons of books out there for you. I totally appreciate that. So that's fine. Not every book is for everyone. And really, we've been very happy with our readers. The real challenge is finding more readers in terms of it's an unusual book. Most MMF romance, and there's a lot of it, is actually very high heat and very much not reflective of poly or even aware that poly is a thing. So there's almost a market for the book in the romance space, except not. So it's a very slow sort of word of mouth process.
Interesting. Well, hopefully we can help out a little bit with that on the podcast.
Yeah, I really want to reach people who don't think they like romance. That's sort of my secret goal.
I have to confess that people are so sweet and they're always offering to send me books. And at some point I just said, you know what? I'm not going to read it. I don't have time to read books that I want to read. I just knew I wasn't going to read it. So I came up with another method of being able to bring authors on the show without my feeling guilty that, I didn't actually have time to read their books. But that being said, I don't read romance novels. I am kind of curious, and I may actually end up reading this one.
Cool. Well, I hope you enjoy it. And, romance is a funny genre because it's so many different things and everybody has a very clear image of what they think it is. And that image is almost always entirely correct, except not covering the entire universe of romance novels. So why ever you don't like romance novels, it's probably totally a real thing. But whether this book falls into that, I have no idea.
Well, I will let you know.
All right.
So are you planning to write more polyromance novels like this?
So, yes. This book in particular was written as a standalone. We've had a lot of people asking us for a sequel. We don't know if that's a thing we're going to do. But one of the things we are working on right now that will not be out until probably late 2018 is a series of romantic suspense books. So it's both, romance novel and caper, but basically polyamorous spies. Like the James
Ooh.
Bond you always actually wanted.
Oh, I
Like
love it.
who wasn't just sexist and wasn't just straight and wasn't just having one night stands. So that's our big new poly novel adventure.
Is there anything that you want the audience to know? Like maybe they're like me and have never read anything that could technically be defined as a romance novel. Is there anything that you would want them to know about this book?
Yes, and about the romance genre in general. I think people who aren't familiar with the romance genre think of the prose style as being very purple or florid or not similar to other genres they may read. And the actual only definition of a romance novel based on like the genre rules in publishing is that the main story is about a relationship and it has a happy ending. So this book, like lots and lots of other romance novels out there, are actually written very much in the style of literary fiction. But instead of there being, oh, my wife died and let me whine about sad things and nothing changes, it's about people being in love. So for people who think that romance maybe isn't for them because of how it's written, I would say give this a chance and give lots of other books in the genre a chance.
Okay, there you have it. So, Racheline, where can we find The Art of Three?
Right now, it is available in ebook from Amazon, Barnes & Nobles, Kobo, Google, iTunes, wherever it is that you buy digital books. And we just approved the paperback today. So that will be available from online distributors any day now. And that also means that if you go into a bookstore and make them look it up in their computers, they can order it for you if you want to buy it from a local bookseller.
Which we do encourage.
Yes, please support local bookstores if you still have them.
And where can we find you?
You can find Erin and I on the web at avian30.com. That's AVIAN and then 30.com. And we explain why our website has that weird name on our website. And you can see all our books there, and we blog about what we're doing and what we're writing, and also events that we're speaking at or vending books at. We'll be at the Rainbow Book Fair in New York City at the end of this month, and we also will be at Outright, which is an LGBT book festival in Washington, D.C. in August.
Fantastic. Racheline, thank you so much for taking the time to talk to us. You've opened my eyes to the romance genre.
Thank you very much.
And best of luck with your continued book sales, and hopefully we'll get some more polyromance novels out there.
Great. Thanks so much.
And thanks again to Racheline for taking the time to talk to us. It was fascinating. I hadn't really given that much thought to polyromance novels because romance isn't really my genre, but it might be after this. Our feedback this week is from Catherine, who said, "Been enjoying your podcast, just heard episode 368. It's very interesting because I've been through a similar situation from Jay's point of view. As a refresher, episode 368 was entitled Metamour Cockblock." And our topic that week was a listener, R, who wrote in asking for advice on a situation in which her once friendly Metamour being her partner's partner with whom she is not romantically involved, that Metamour J asked for some personal time and space, which ended up leading to a 6-month communication blockade. That silence adversely affected both R and her partner's relationship. How do you reopen the lines of communication with somebody who won't talk to you anymore? So Catherine this week says, "It was very interesting because I've been through a similar situation from Jay's point of view. In fact, except for details like the length of relationship in the workplace setting, this could have been my exact story. I just wanted to share that in my case, communication was terminated due to repeated confrontational behavior and boundary violations by R, culminating in a disturbing emotional meltdown, after which I requested space. Our polycule had been very tight previously, and we scheduled 2 subsequent meetups that were quickly escalated by R and ended again in ugly scenes. At one point, she had to be bodily restrained in a public place to prevent her following me out to my car. At that point, I told my husband I wasn't going to try again and didn't want further interaction with her. He continued the relationship, and R made repeated efforts to contact me and set up meetings. I wrote her a brief, courteous note saying that things didn't work out between us, that we'd not been able to resolve conflict, and that I no longer wanted contact with her. She continued her attempts to reopen communications, and meanwhile things became increasingly uncomfortable for my husband, who had to deal with frequent complaints from R about the situation. The relationship ultimately ended when R showed up at our house uninvited and, when told not to come into the house, entered anyway and pursued me around the house while I was on the phone with 911. She was finally escorted off the property by police, and even after that made a number of attempts to recontact my husband and rekindle the relationship. I've heard a number of second and third-hand accounts of R's grievances, and all omit her harassing behavior and paint her as the victim of my inexplicable refusal to communicate. I'm so glad you gave the advice you did about focusing on yourself and not trying to force someone to communicate with you. Although advice is obviously intended to be sympathetic to the questioner, abuse and harassment does happen in the poly community and can be very serious. Best, Catherine. Well, Catherine, I'm so sorry that happened to you. And yes, this is something that it took me a long time to learn with doing the podcast, because when someone writes in, they're going to write things from their point of view, right? And they're probably not going to paint themselves as too terrible of a person. And it's possible that they paint the person that they are having some type of conflict with. They might paint them fairly. They'll probably paint them in some kind of biased manner. But what it comes down to as an advice giver is that I can only advise the person who is writing to me. I can't do anything about, for example, if you had written to me, I can't do anything about the person harassing you. I can tell you how to respond to harassment, and it sounds like you did the right thing. You called the police, maybe you get a restraining order, like I can tell you what to do. But it doesn't do me any good to tell you, well, R shouldn't be showing up at your house. Well, R isn't listening, or if she is, she's not the one who wrote me. So my responsibility is to the person who wrote me the letter and to see what that person can do. Now, I can have an opinion about what R does, but that doesn't really matter because everything I hear is from your point of view and it may or may not be accurate. What I can do is give you advice on what you can do. And for those who didn't listen to episode 368, the advice that we gave was basically, you cannot force someone to communicate with you. So she was, in 368, she was asking about how do I reopen the lines of communication if somebody won't talk to me? And we said, you can't. If somebody won't talk to you, then they won't talk to you. That's not within your control. What is in your control and your sphere of influence is to take care of yourself, tend to your own garden. If you have jealousy or insecurities around it, put all your coping mechanisms in place to deal with those. Do your best to nurture the health of the relationship you do have, and you kind of got to let go of the fact that somebody doesn't want to communicate with you because you can't make anyone do anything. Thanks, Catherine, for writing in. I'm so sorry you had that experience, and I'm glad that the advice was, if not helpful to you, at least not horribly offensive. It's time for your Happy Poly Moment of the Week, brought to you by Fubbly Polyamorists everywhere. And this week's Happy Poly Moment is from Meredith, who said, "We all started out as swingers and more or less stumbled into polyamory. My husband and the wife of a couple we befriended and swap with regularly discovered they love each other, and it was unexpected. As I'm the only person in our foursome that seems naturally inclined to poly, compersion came easy for me. It's been a lot of fumbling around to find the right balance. I adore my Metamour, and we are genuinely good friends. I adore her husband and the sexy friendship we have. As I said, We are learning about this lifestyle and figuring things out as we go along. We've had our tough moments, but generally support each other in whatever way we can, which is sort of outstanding on its own. But what made me think we were all really in it for the long haul? We literally take turns helping each other clean house. We do the shopping together. So many little errands we run for each other. They babysit and help me wrangle our 3 rambunctious toddlers, one with special needs, so I can actually take them on outings while my husband travels for work. They don't have to do any of that, and it's had such a huge impact on our lives. All of our extended family lives out of state, so the kids finally have an auntie and uncle that they get to see and adore regularly. And recently, on my husband's and Meta's designated weekly date night, she has taken to cooking dinner for the 3 of us, and all I have to do is sit on this sofa and relax. I watched hubby and Meta being her Metamour, prepare dinner a couple of days ago. They were chatting and smiling at each other, and it just made my heart happy. I felt like my family was finally complete. Funny how you sometimes find something amazing that you weren't even aware you needed. Aww. And thank you to our donors this week. We got a one-time donation from Manfred of $6.90. He says, "Scratches to the minx. I've been following your podcast and gladly benefiting from your generous resources for quite some time now. Well, from the very beginning. Thanks and love from Germany." And 13 Things Desired sent us a donation as well, saying, "So great to meet you at Poly Living in February. Thanks to you and Lusty Guy for all you do for all of us. Enjoy your favorite position," because she donated $69, and she knows she knows that when you donate $69, we do 69, and I get to be where I like it, on the bottom. If you donate 96, then I have to be on top. And I would also like to welcome Stephanie, our newest Polyweekly Playmate. The Polyweekly Playmates are monthly subscribers who basically give us $1.99, $4.99, or $9.99 out of the kindness of their hearts because we don't really offer any special benefits to the monthly subscription except for, of course, my eternal thanks and maybe a couple of scritches and purrs. So welcome, Stephanie, to the Playmates. Well, I think that about wraps it up for today's show. If you have a question or comment, you can email us, polyweekly@gmail.com, or call 802-505-POLY. The podcast always has been and always will be free. We do appreciate those donations if you can do them. If not, just tell a friend. Send a link to our iTunes page or to polyweekly.com and ask a friend to listen to us. Thanks for listening, everyone. Thanks to Racheline for the interview about our new poly romance novel, The Art of Three. And remember, it's not all about the sex.